Hello and welcome to Just Good Game News, your weekly place for feel-good stories and good happenings in the industry, where I try and bring together all the things that might make you feel even better about video games going into each weekend. This version goes live Friday afternoons on YouTube, the Just Good Game News, which is taken from the Just Good Game Show, which you can catch over on Patreon early if you want to get it on Wednesday, or you can wait one more day till Saturday and get the free feeds version there. The overall trajectory for this stuff, though, is to try and celebrate video games. Overall, we have various different topics for the show every single week. The overlooked games of the week, obviously the breaking rumors and leaks and news and things like that, alongside different game spotlights, tips and tricks and trivia as well. I just love the video games, not gonna lie. And as much as this week has been dominated by Gamescom discourse, obviously there was so many things shown at Jeff Keighley's most recent showcase, I've still found a handful of little things you should know about going into the weekend itself. So let's start with the breaking news, the breaking feel goods. Now there's one of these that isn't necessarily as rosy cheeked as the other ones, but we'll get there. The first thing is a state of play coming from Sony. This comes from, in regards to reporting, Jeff Grubb, Giant Bomb's Jeff Grubb, veteran journalist, veteran leaker himself, reporting on the idea of Sony putting out a state of play at some point across September. Now, this lines up with the way that Sony have operated across the entire generation so far, where they always have a state of play in September. And when it comes to Sony themselves, you know, they are still recovering from all the live service stuff going sideways. They are still kind of in need of a bit of a win. You know, Concord was taken offline after 2 weeks, and so that got me thinking about all the different games that, you know, have been rumored, that have leaked early, that they could get on top of. The last thing regarding Wolverine was when Insomniac got hacked, like last year or the year before, and we all got to see this in progress weird build version of Wolverine that wasn't the real thing or the finished thing. And I feel like Wolverine, maybe it's time that that game finally shows up. You know, it'd be good to know what the hell is happening with Insomniac, considering that leak itself and all the rumors of a Venom game that was mentioned around there as well. Like, it made no sense in Spider-Man 2 to you know, make a whole gameplay system around Venom, a whole move set and a physics system and everything else, and he's only used for like one level at the end of that game. That always felt a little bit fishy. In terms of other things that are rumored that Sony are yet to fully capitalize on, you know, in terms of an official announcement, we have a 2D Metroidvania God of War game. This has already leaked a few times, but it's been mentioned that this title's already been worked on in terms of an old school God of War where it's set during the Greek era, so it's more, you know, flinging the chains around Kratos. It's not the Leviathan axe, it's the older version of him, or the old school version of him. So it'd be cool to confirm that. We haven't had a God of War announcement since God of War Ragnarok. There was the Valhalla DLC that was plugged into that game, which in itself felt like a remnant of a potential live service title. There's just, well, that was a whole other thing. Sony Bend, oh my god, there was a whole thing where Sony had Sony Bend making a dedicated God of War live service game, which even itself, that was cancelled as well during all the live service stuff. My point is that Sony could do with a win. There are various rumors and leaks and games that are already out there in need of updates that they could throw into this thing. There's also mention of an Uncharted game that in theory is being worked on by Naughty Dog, as they work, one half of the team works on Intergalactic. Apparently the other half of the team is putting the next Uncharted together. That's been mentioned a few times across the last few years, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm taking a schlurp. Cheers to you as I take a schlurp. Next cool thing down is Starfield arriving on the Switch 2. Now, this comes from Nate the Hate, who's fast become arguably the most reliable leaker in the industry, mainly because he was the guy who got out there and put his entire reputation on the fact of predicting or leaking when the Switch 2 announcement trailer, the reveal trailer, was going to happen earlier this year, and he was bang on. I remember that dude just tweeting like a meme of just relaxing after the fact, being like, yep, I just nailed the biggest leak in recent gaming history. And so this guy got out there very recently and said that Starfield is coming to Switch next year. Now, we know that Indiana Jones is coming across, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. That was mentioned during Gamescom, but whilst that was mentioned officially, Starfield hasn't been mentioned at all, even though various different conversations from the likes of Phil Spencer, you know, over on Xbox, the head of Microsoft Gaming, Phil Spencer, has talked about all the other Xbox exclusives slowly making their way across to other platforms. You know, we are getting Gears of War Reloaded later this month, whilst Helldivers goes over to Xbox, but that in itself is getting Halo as part of it, even though Helldivers is a PlayStation series. There's a lot of cross-compatibility stuff going on, and Starfield seems like it's in the mix as well. I actually really loved Starfield. I thought that thing was great. I get the criticisms around how it feels a little bit too old and a little bit too traditional, like a mid-2000s Bethesda game, but I still love the overall art design, the story itself, and the message of the story I thought was great, and I thought it ended really, really well. Not going to do spoilers, but I did think it was an extremely confident video game. So I actually loved Starfield, and if the Switch 2 can pull it off, having that thing in the palm of your hand would actually be really, really cool. Next news item down, and this is the one that I referred to before, is not being, not usually with this show we do the break-in feel-goods. They're all feel-good stories. They're all things to feel awesome about. This one's a little bit mixed, and there's some good mixed in with the bad, and there's a lot of bad. Which is the fact that Bioshock 4 is continuing, but it has a new head of the Bioshock franchise. Now, this guy is called Rod Ferguson. He used to head up Gears of War back in the day. Then he went across to Blizzard. He's been, for the last 5 years, he's looked after Diablo, which is where a lot of the negativity around him as an individual comes from, mainly because Diablo 4 and Diablo Immortals, obviously became insanely money-grubby, insanely monetizable in regards to different loot box structures and different keys that you have to try and unlock or pay for. It was a whole thing. Diablo still made an absolute killing, even though its monetization practices were very aggressive. But Rod Ferguson was part of that entire thing, and it was present at Blizzard when that happened. So the good portion of this is that Bioshock 4 definitely exists, is definitely moving forward. We've known about it since 2019. Publisher 2K actually formed a new studio to look after it called Cloud Chamber back in 2019. But internally, apparently the version of the game that has been created for the last sort of 5-6 years apparently just failed a recent internal milestone, a recent internal review from 2K, which is why they've brought Rod Ferguson in. Now, Ferguson, Big Fergie, as he's known to his friends, did work on Bioshock Infinite as well, and brought that game together right at the close of development. So he does know what he's doing, and a lot of people absolutely love Bioshock Infinite. So you would like to believe that this guy can finally land the plane. It just seems like trying to get another Bioshock together after Ken Levine left the project, or left the series and formed his own team, after leaving Irrational and forming, I think they're called Ghost Story Games is the name of his studio, the guys that are making Judas. It seems like it's been a bit of a struggle to put the next Bioshock together. So we are getting a game. It has a new studio head. It has a new, like I said, head of the Bioshock franchise. And it is someone who worked on Bioshock Infinite and other big franchises like Gears of War and like Diablo. But the sad side of it is the horrible reality of the amount of team members who have put so much time into that game only to sadly be laid off and removed from those positions. So who knows how long it's going to take to put this next version of Bioshock together. All we can do is cross the fingers. In theory, we're still going to be getting the Judas game as well, like I mentioned before, from Ken Levine. So we will see. In theory, in the next few years, we get Judas from Ken Levine and we get a new Bioshock from one of the dudes that was instrumental in bringing Bioshock Infinite together. So maybe in the end, we all win. It's just horrifically gross times right now in regards to layoffs and personnel and everything else to get there in the end. Final thing is, are you a Friday the 13th fan? Because I am, but mainly I'm a huge fan of the previous game that we got. I actually really love that thing. It came out in 2017, and then it was, oh god, there's so much. I'll wrap back around to what happened with the Friday the 13th game, because the news that I wanted to get out there is that we're getting a new Friday the 13th game, which comes from a guy called Vincent DeSanti. He worked on a series of fan films called Never Hike Alone. There's like a trilogy of them, and seems to be pretty plugged into what's happening with the Friday the 13th franchise, and revealed on a recent podcast that there are 2 games upcoming in the Friday the 13th franchise. One of them apparently is already in active development. He said both of them are quite a ways off, but one of them is in active development, and the one that's in active development isn't being made by Ilphonic or Gun. Now, they are both developers that worked on the 2017 game, mainly because that game, like I alluded to before, went through absolute hell in regards to its post-launch development. There was a whole kickoff in regards to licensing fees and licensing rights and different developers being removed from the project and then another team being brought in. That game went through absolute hell, but it is absolutely a cult classic. Like, it's so much fun to play. It has so many great mechanics. One player, because you mostly play it online. One player is Jason. Everybody else are the different members of the camp, and you're trying to escape. Or you're trying to kill everybody. It's kind of what Dead by Daylight does really well as well. And it's just such an experimental title to go into. It feels really unique playing as this slasher villain trying to hunt everybody down, or you're trying to work together on the campsite side to make it out alive. There's a lot of different things that you can trigger, different set pieces, different powers that you can do as Jason. The game had a lot of really, really cool ideas. Sadly, though, like I mentioned, in regards to the different licensing rights and the horrible post-launch reality of looking after that game on the studio side, the game was taken offline at the end of 2024. This was after they stopped, they had to commit to no further updates due to all the licensing back and forth. And then at the end of 2024, it was removed from, the servers themselves were taken offline. So if you still own the game, you can play it. And as far as I know, you can do local multiplayer, but I could be wrong. But either way, it was a very, very rocky past decade for this game, even though its heart seemed to be in the right place. So here's to the future of the Friday the 13th brand IP thing, at least in gaming, because there's a lot you can do with this general setup of a slasher fiction approach, putting different players in different spots, choosing to, stealth outwit each other. I just think it's a really cool setup, and hopefully one of these two games is a continuation of what the 2017 game set in motion. Now, normally the next segment would be the game spotlight of the week, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm still getting through Mafia: The Old Country. I would still recommend it. I'm still loving it. I'm about 3 hours or so in, and good lord, the story has kicked in. It's awesome. I'm loving the gunplay. I'm loving the horse riding. I'm loving the overall visual presentation, the acting, the characters, the story. It's bellissimo. I'm a huge fan, and I can't wait to play more of it. Ironically, I've ended up doing a game spotlight, but I will have a lot more to say about that game once I get through it. Which is to say that we go to the next segment, which is overlooked games of the week. Now, these don't always need to be new games. They can be old ones. I'm still playing, like I said, a lot of Mafia and a hell of a lot of Shotgun Cop Man, but I've already included Shotgun Cop Man as an overlooked game of in recent memory. I included that a couple of weeks ago. I'd still recommend it. It's so much fun. But over on the YouTube, Frozen Ninja recommended last week Fast Fusion on Switch 2, which I would hugely back. If you're getting a little bit sick of Mario Kart World and you think it's a little bit too one note, and that game's maybe just a little bit of a letdown overall, I massively enjoyed it, but I totally get that it's a canvas to be added to over time. Fast Fusion is the sequel to 2017's Fast RMX, which is almost like a Wipeout style anti-grav racer, not too far off F-Zero, which is a more Nintendo-like comparison, but it's just stupidly fast. Like, you want to see what a Switch 2 can do in regards to rendering something at 120 frames a second. It's Fast Fusion. No power-ups. It's all about juking for position and using different boost pads on the ground, different colors that you can switch into for your ship to trigger these different boost pads on the track and just keep chaining them together. It's really satisfying. One of the best exclusives isn't necessarily first party. It can be something like this instead. Another mention comes from Nate on the Discord, who suggests SOCOM. Like, oh my god, the amount of memories that came back to my mind thinking about the original SOCOM on PlayStation 2 with the little headset when you're always like telling it was like a tactical third-person shooter made by a company called Zipper Interactive. And sadly, they're not going anymore. They were shut down by Sony back in 2012 due to how badly received SOCOM 4 was. But the original SOCOM and the original 3 games were absolutely stellar. I feel like SOCOM keeps getting brought up as something that Sony should absolutely just bring back. It feels like they already own this really cool, fictional military shooter series, and why not double down on that thing and bring it back? It's just SOCOM 1 was just so innovative, and yes, it was. You did have the microphone, the voice commands, fire at will and all that kind of stuff. But I had an absolute blast with it. When that game was responding to you and the microphone worked, little teenage me was having an absolute blast. And so, shout out to the original SOCOM. That thing was great. And if it wasn't for SOCOM 4 trying to be Gears of War so hard, then that game assumedly would have sold better in 2011, and it wouldn't have led to the team being shut down altogether in 2012. Also, shout out to Unit 13 on the PlayStation Vita. It's like the last game that Zipper made, not part of the SOCOM series necessarily, but still plays a lot like that. And lastly, for overlooked games, the new gent over on Discord mentions Dante's Inferno, which I feel like has become this really revered title. The fact that it was published by EA is a whole thing, their association these days being with anything other than a third-person action game. But yeah, Dante's Inferno, very much a God of War-like, a little bit like the Conan the Barbarian game that came out across the 2000s as well, which in itself I would say is a bit of a hidden gem as well. If you want to call God of War an entire genre and not a franchise, then you can include things like the Conan game or Dante's Inferno. It's also worth mentioning Dante's Inferno because last night at Gamescom, La Comédie Divine, the Divine Comedy, got announced as well with a teaser trailer, and Inferno is only one part of that overall story from the iconic and legendary author Dante Alighieri. So it's cool that we're getting ostensibly another Dante's Inferno, except that the new one is the entire story, the entire, the Divine Comedy, as opposed to just the Inferno chapter of it, which is at the very, very beginning. But still, Dante's Inferno played so well. That game was on PS3, it was on 360. I think it's on backwards compatibility on Xbox, but I would totally recommend it. Great story, great presentation, super gruesome parts in that thing in regards to the cutscenes and the art direction, but really cool. Next up, it's 3 game deals just for you. Every week I go through all the different storefronts and see which games have been reduced reduced in price the most, see which things I would personally recommend that line up with certain deals that might only be available for a good few days or whatever. The first one this deal goes on until the 27th of August on the UK store, but it's one day more in the US. You guys have it until the 28th. But still, this game is just so cool. The series itself, there's only 2 games in this series, even though, like I said, they're from Ryoga Gotoku, which are the Like a Dragon developers, the Yakuza developers. Judgment was an attempt to make a separate spin-off series, of which there are only 2. There is Judgment, and there is Lost Judgment. And after that, there was a whole dispute around the licensing rights to the actor that appears as Takayuki Yagami, the main character. He's part of some overall acting agency, and the agency didn't want to keep lending his likeness to the game, so they just had to wind the whole thing down, which is just a huge shame, because a more detective-focused game in, the likes of Kamurocho and the different fictional versions of cities that are in these games, taken from the likes of Tokyo and Osaka in Japan, like a detective thriller in those locations is just awesome, and the Judgment series is just so cool. I would recommend Lost Judgment more than Judgment, so we'll keep an eye out for when that one goes on sale. But the original is still really cool. Great combat system, arguably the best combat system that the Like a Dragon series has ever had. You can utilize parts of the environment to kick off and do walls and different grabs and takedowns and things. I really love this game. It does have a little bit of a slow burn at the beginning. It takes a little bit of time to kick in. It's weird how many mini games they have for every last thing that you're doing as Yagami, whether that is picking your keys off a key ring thing to choose what to put into a door, or just tailing a suspect one cover point at a time. But I do think it kicks in, and like I said, I think the combat's awesome. The amount of mini games and things you can do in the city is really expansive and varied, and overall I'm just a bit sad that this series didn't get to keep going. Both Judgment and Lost Judgment are kind of awesome. Next game down is Hand of Fate 2. This is £5.99 on the UK store until the 3rd of September. Now, if you haven't heard of Hand of Fate, but maybe let's just put 2 things together. Maybe you're a bit of a God of War fan. Maybe, actually, no. Maybe you're more of a Batman Arkham fan, and maybe you're a bit of a Magic the Gathering fan. Just put those fingers together, mesh those fingers together, because Hand of Fate is a really cool game. It's first person in terms of the way that it opens. You sit down with a mysterious person inside this weird traveling truck thing, and the dude starts playing this mysterious card game with you. However, once you start looking at the cards, it transforms into a third-person action game, and all the different cards that you put down can dictate where you go in terms of the game itself, whether you spawn like a shop or some different enemies or whatever. You're just trying to get ostensibly across the table in regards to how you're sitting playing this game with this weird individual right in front of you. But every card you put down changes the gameplay itself, changes the rewards that'll come from different fights and what you're able to buy, and then you end up modifying your deck next time around. It's a little bit of a roguelike in that respect. But the combat's just really cool. You've got Arkham-style combat. It has a nice animation style, and the overall presentation and concept is just super unique. I love the idea of a card-based game that turns into an action game when you play certain cards. And Hand of Fate 1 was super awesome as well. Hand of Fate 2 just being a natural extension of what the developers were going for in the original, with more variables in regards to deck building and things like that. So it's just a really cool indie game that I don't feel ever really got its, got the spotlight shone on it. So any chance I'm getting, I'm shouting out Hand of Fate 2. And my last recommendation is Nobody Wants to Die. I mentioned this earlier in the Just Good Game Show over on the podcast side of things, because this is a super cool cyberpunk detective thriller. It came out either last year or the year before. It's down to £7.99 over on the Xbox store / the Microsoft store if you want to pick up something that will only take you maybe a day or 2 to get through. It's very short, but it is absolutely loaded with a gorgeous art style. And like I said, a really cool setup of a detective thriller in a cyberpunk city, like a Blade Runner style city with all these giant vistas. It's such a showcase of what Unreal 5 tech can do, and you also have various different gadgets and different ways to get through different crime scenes to find out what happened in this murder mystery serial killer style setup. I won't give anything away because the story is a little bit interpretational once you have the full picture anyway, but in terms of going on a ride, I absolutely love this thing. It has atmosphere out the wazoo. It is so recommendable in regards to just being in a space, and the soundtrack is absolutely stunning. Really great slow sleazy jazz numbers while you're just standing drinking a bottle or having a smoke on the side of a neon sign in the middle of this giant utopian city, or largely more dystopian city. But the way that it all is presented, I think, is massively recommendable. And the developers are a first-time studio as well. Just thoroughly impressive across the board. Next section is tips and tricks. Now, usually I break down a game-specific tip or trick and highlight some way that you can play a game, something like that. But I did just want to throw this in. It's a very quick little tip here because I am experimenting a little bit with shortening the show. This is episode 3. There was also episode episode 0, so it's the 4th time that I've done this. And every time I do different lengths of the show itself, and I'm curious what people will respond to, whether, you know, like clipping this bit out of the podcast, putting this thing on YouTube and editing it down, whether the whole thing should be snappier overall, or whether it's better to go a little bit longer and include more things. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, to coin a classic vintage YouTube phrase. But in regards to tips and tricks this week, I just wanted to shout out something that I didn't realize until I went on the PlayStation Store. Because across the last few days, Sony dropped Resident Evil 2 and 3, the PS1 versions, on the PlayStation Store. You can go in there, you can buy the PS1 versions just separately. I think they're like $7.99 or something. It's what they usually do when they add PS1 games on there. However, one thing they've done here that I haven't noticed before is they are honoring past purchases of Resident Evil 2 and 3. And if you had a PlayStation Vita like I did, it's one of the only other Sony platforms that had these PS1 originals available in digital form. And even then, the PS Vita storefront was discontinued. But back in the day, there was a whole thing. You had to go online, use the online version of the store, and buy the game through there, and then that was then tied to your account. My overall point, though, is if you bought Resident Evil 2 or 3 on the PS Vita, you already own it on PlayStation 5. And the last section for this week's Just Good Game News is a little piece of trivia. I like sending you off into the weekend with something that makes you go, This week, I'm thinking about Gears of War. That thing's going to be out. Gears of War Reloaded is going to be out by the time the next episode of this goes out next Friday. And so I was just thinking of Gears of War based trivia. Did you know that Gears of War is not the first series to do cover-based shooting? It's very much known for it, and the term at the time was stop and pop, stopping behind cover, popping up and shooting a guy and going back and forward. Nay, I say, loads of people forget about Kill.Switch on PlayStation 2, and even more people forget about Operation Winback on N64. And so it's worth shouting those games out. Give those games their flowers. Kill.Switch was one of the first games. Operation Winback had it as well, but Winback was a little bit more rigid in regards to going in and out of cover. Kill.Switch sped things up and got a little bit closer to Gears of War, and then Gears of War capitalized on it and obviously made it an iconic feature. It's the series that people think of when they think of stop and pop cover systems. But it's, like I said, it's worth saying that the likes of Kill.Switch and Operation Winback did it as well. And for the fans of those games, I see you. I was a Kill.Switch fan, both the band and the game, and it's worth just shouting those games out. So just a little bit of trivia, as much as Gears of War popularized this stuff, it did appear in a couple of games beforehand. And that has been the Just Good Game News. Hopefully you enjoyed various little snippets of certain game deals, recommendable titles, and breaking news as well. Like I said, Gamescom has massively dominated the news cycle this week, so hopefully there were still enough things in there that you got to enjoy. Please head over to the Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tilford if you would like to be involved in the shows themselves. You can always submit questions, you can shape the shows, and just get involved in the Discord. We have an awesome community over there of various like-minded gamers, and I'm a huge fan of how all of this stuff is coming together. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'll catch you on the Discord. Maybe I'll catch you on the Patreon. If not, I will catch you next week.